and welcome to the May 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Boulder City Council. We're going to get started with a couple of announcements here. So, first off, COVID-19 vaccinations. For information and provider locations for free COVID-19 testing, go to www.boco.org/COVID testing. And the Boulder site is 2445 Stasio Drive. That's open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And for vaccine information and provider locations, you can go to www.boco.org/COVID vaccine. Next, 2022 boards and commissions recruitment. The regular annual recruitment period has closed, but we are still recruiting for the following boards due to the low number or no applications being received. There are a few of them. Beverage Licensing Authority, the Boulder Junction Access District Parking, as well as Travel Demand Management, Board of Zoning Adjustment, Cannabis Licensing Advisory Board, Design Advisory Board, Downtown Management Commission, Library Commission, and the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission. So these applications will be accepted until further notice, and you can find those descriptions of those boards and commissions and vacancies online at www.bouldercolorado.gov/boards-commissions. If you have any questions or need assistance, please contact the City Clerk's office at cityclerksoffice@bouldercolorado.gov. And with that, I will go ahead and gavel our meeting started. And Alicia, if you could call the roll, please.
Of course, sir, and good evening, everyone. Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Well, that's hot. Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Friend.
Here.
Present. Spear.
Present.
Wallach is absent. Weiner.
Present.
And Yates.
Late but present.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Thanks so much. I'll just note that Councilmember Wallach is homesick, and we wish him a speedy recovery. All right, I'm going to start by turning to Councilmember Spear, who wants to make a few comments.
Thank you, Mayor. It feels important to acknowledge the grief and fear and anger some of us are feeling today, so thank you to my colleagues for giving me this time. Last night, we learned that the Supreme Court is likely to overturn Roe v. Wade. This decision would eliminate reproductive rights for people of all genders who have a uterus. This is the latest attack on basic rights by far-right extremists, and in the face of a rising authoritarian movement, it is unlikely to be the last. Those in our community who we marginalize will continue to suffer first and most. But ultimately, none of us is safe when any of us are unable to make our own decisions about how we care for our bodies, who we love, and how we vote. And that reality is unsettling for everyone who believes in democracy. I am grateful to our state legislators and governor for recently giving those of us with a uterus the explicit right to have an abortion. I'm grateful to the reproductive health care providers who will be even more at risk now, and to all those who will be working even harder to keep providers and their patients safe. And thank you to those in our community who advocate for reproductive rights and other social justice issues every day. I hope we as a council will recognize this moment as one in which we need to amplify our efforts to address the inequities in our community. We are not exempt from the larger trends across our country, and in the face of rising authoritarianism, working for social justice is a moral imperative, especially for those of us in positions of power. I hope that all of you who are hurting from this news and from the biases and oppression you experience every day have the support you need right now. If you or a loved one needs more support, you can find mental health information and resources at coloradocrisisservices.org. You aren't alone today or any day. Thank you again for this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole, for those important comments. Good. All right. We will move next to a declaration for Older American Month to be presented by Councilmember Weiner.
Older Americans Month, May 2022. In 1963, only 17 million Americans had reached their Actually, yeah, only 17 million Americans had reached their 65th birthday, and approximately 1/3 of older Americans lived in poverty with few programs to meet their needs. To raise awareness of the needs of older Americans and to honor and acknowledge the accomplishments of adults ages 60 and over, President John F. Kennedy, after discussions with the National Council of Senior Citizens, created Older Americans Month. The City of Boulder has recognized the value of acknowledging, honoring, and supporting diversity, inclusion, and equity for older adults in our community and the need to remove barriers for success based on ageism. The City of Boulder is committed to increasing access to services that support aging in place and building on current programs and services for older adults. This commitment ensures that the 16,000 plus older adults in our community are welcomed, included, and supported. Each May, the Administration for Community Living sets the theme for Older Americans Month, and this year the focus is on exploring the ways older adults can remain and stay involved in their communities as they age. The theme is timely, as Colorado is the second fastest aging state in the nation. It is projected that by 2023, Coloradans aged 60 plus will outnumber Coloradans aged 18 and younger. In addition, the only age group that is projected to see an increase in national workforce participation by 2030 is one that includes adults ages 75 and older. In 2020, the Housing and Human Services Department, in collaboration with other city departments, began a 2-year project called Lifelong Boulder as part of a statewide initiative to make Colorado communities age-friendly. In recognition of these efforts, the City of Boulder has received the designation of a Colorado Lifelong City. These efforts lay a foundation that assures all residents of Boulder are valued as they live, work, and age in our community. We, the City Council of Boulder, Colorado, declare May 2022 as Older Americans Month and urge the community to take time this month to recognize the strengths of older adults in our community as essential and valuable members, as well as acknowledging the individuals who support and serve them. Signed by Mayor Brockett.
Thanks so much for that, Tara. Very good. Well, now we're going to move on to a special occasion. We have the honor of hosting representatives of the University of Colorado who are going to come tell us about an extremely exciting initiative that they're working on. So, Lori Call, if maybe I could hand it over to you and you can tell us some more about this.
Thanks so much. Good evening, Mayor Brockett and members of Boulder City Council. I'm Lori Call, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Local Government and Community Engagement at CU Boulder. I'm here this evening with Chancellor Phil DeStefano and John Leslie, who is our executive lead for the UN Climate Summit. And we're here this evening to tell you a little bit about this event that we have coming up December 1st through the 4th of 2022. Boulder's decades-long leadership in climate issues positioned CU Boulder to host this international gathering of world leaders committed to climate solutions. Locally, we've faced devastating fires and floods, and we know that we are increasingly at risk. While the International Summit will certainly include a lot of global elements, our goal is to also have local dimensions and to engage the passion and expertise of our local leaders, and so we're here this evening to ask for your support. We've had initial conversations with staff, and we believe that this aligns with the work plan priorities. And our hope is that with your support, we can work with Nuria, as well as Jonathan Cohen and his team, to identify additional opportunities for city leaders and residents to tackle the climate solutions at a local, regional, and global level. I will now turn to Chancellor DeStefano, who will provide additional information, and then John can provide more programming details.
Thank you, Lori, and good evening, everyone. Mayor Brockett, members of City Council. I'm Phil DeStefano, Chancellor here at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And CU Boulder is thrilled to co-host the Right Here, Right Now Global Climate Summit in this December with the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The event is guided by the idea that climate change has become a humanitarian crisis with impacts like rising sea levels, droughts, wildfires, floods, heat waves, and expanding disease vectors. Of course, our community is no stranger to serious climate disasters and how they impact people's lives. We know these impacts are particularly damaging for marginalized individuals. The Climate Summit is focused on finding solutions and taking action. By gathering some of the preeminent human rights and climate experts, world leaders, and cultural influencers, we will outline concrete actions we can take to make the necessary changes. CU Boulder is uniquely positioned to convene an event like this because of our excellence in climate research, strong track record on sustainability, and our proficiency in several areas associated with human rights, including law, business, engineering, and others. The summit is set for December 1 through December 4th on the CU Boulder campus and will include keynote speakers, panels, and other activities with in-person and remote or virtual components. We were thrilled to announce our first keynote speaker 2 weeks ago, Mary Robinson. She is the former President of Ireland, former UN Commissioner of Human Rights, and a best-selling author and advocate focused on climate change. With the visibility of this event and so many high-caliber individuals becoming involved, the summit will be a tremendous opportunity to showcase not just the university, but the entire Boulder community and highlight our commitment to these issues. The City of Boulder has set numerous specific goals around climate action, and I know that CU Boulder shares the same concerns and ambitions when it comes to addressing this problem. So I'm hopeful that we can collaborate and amplify the goals and solutions that arise from the summit. My colleague John Leslie will share a few of the ideas we are considering for integrating the local community into the event, and we would love to hear your ideas for what else we can do. So thank you for your support, and John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, council members, for the privilege of speaking with you this evening. So as we started developing the overall agenda for the summit, it became clear, based on the interest and some initial conversations with Jonathan and the staff, that we needed to really start building some local programming into this to really capitalize on the expertise we have here in the local community. Also, it gives us the opportunity to bring the Front Range and Colorado as a whole into the conversations that will be taking place December 1st through 4th. So some of the ideas we have focus on bringing our own faculty expertise, some of the local federal labs, some K-12 content and activation opportunities, but also some programming here in the city during the dates of the event that could include evening receptions, other programming, the use of venues in the city, and really the opportunity to combine both this global expertise that we'll be bringing to Boulder with the local expertise we have here in town. So we've had some initial kind of speculative conversations. We see opportunities for some lead-up events that can really help the community understand how it can be a part of this, how it can engage, and how it can really show Boulder in its best light relative to climate solutions, human rights, and the things we can take action on together. We're really excited about the opportunity to work with staff, work with Jonathan and the team to start bringing those things together. And with your endorsement, we are ready to get started with the team right away. So with that, I'll open it up for your questions, and thank you again for your time.
Well, thanks so much for that, John and Phil and Lori. This is an incredibly exciting opportunity, and what an honor for it to be coming to Boulder and the university. But given the university's status as a eminent world research institution and a longtime innovator on climate solutions, it's only appropriate at the same time. I think I speak for the whole council and the city organization to say that we are ready to partner with you however is helpful on this important event. So just let us know, and I'll see if any of my colleagues want to offer a thought.
Just a procedural question. I'm also very excited and think it's a wonderful opportunity for the city, and grateful for CU for being such a leader within our community. But when you say, like, let us know when you're ready, do we have to, like, give a nod of 5 or anything? Like, I'm sure that we are all wanting to right? Could we just, if there's something needed, can we
Thumbs
do
up.
it?
I think we get all the nodding heads we need
That,
here. Yes,
that is
we're-
fine.
Exciting.
Thank you. Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Right. Well, do keep us posted, and we look very much forward to working together on this. And thanks for being here today. Okay. Well, with that, we're now going to move to open comment. So, Brenda, are you going to do the announcement here about protocols? Very good. Come on up or down.
I will come to the podium, and I think Emily will share the slides, but I will have my cheat slides here in front of me. Good evening, Council. Good evening, community. We remind you before open comment tonight that the city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as supporting democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement process, please visit a webpage that you see there on the slide, but the easiest thing to do is to search Productive Atmospheres in our search bar from the homepage. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting tonight. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they're commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted for folks who've joined us online tonight. And that is it for the announcements. And we can move into our public comment, Mayor.
Okay, thanks so much, Brenda. All right, our first three speakers are Patrick Murphy, Ramsey Abuita, and Robert Love.
I'm waiting for a slide.
And Patrick, we are pulling up that slide now. I think you will be able to see it, but if not, we will let you know that it's ready. And Emily is pushing buttons frantically.
When you open PowerPoint, just press F5 and it'll display the slide full screen.
Thank you. There we go. Can you see it, Patrick?
Yeah, we're good.
Great.
My name is Patrick Murphy. I've lived in Boulder 52 years. The planet burns, floods, and dies as Boulder fiddles with climate change for over a decade. Don't miss next week's Boulder XL Advisory Panel, since it'll be 3 months before there's another. I'd like to know how many of the 17 or 18 members of the panel actually show up. It looks like it's only about 10 that show up for the Zoom meetings, and if that's true, they should be asked to participate or leave and a replacement assigned. I'd love to be a replacement and add a critical point of view that's mostly missing. Boulder climate action is being led by leftover Muni personnel, and I guess the excuse they like to use is, we were just doing what we were told. They were told to not include stranded costs, which would have been one of the largest costs of the Muni. They just went along. They were told they could take XL customers and properties outside of city limits. They just went along. These are not leaders. They are not demonstrably in a hurry in any way other than to continue the blah, blah, blah of climate change, which provides them with a paycheck, but accomplishes nothing of real significance. If they want $5 million more for climate mitigation and have no specifics other than platitudes, then the Muni pattern is repeated. Remember when the Muni asked for an additional $4 million in 2017? and got it? Remember when the Muni asked for an additional $3 million in 2019 and got it? Can you see the pattern? We got nothing for those $7 million, and worse, we got nothing for $30 million, but lots of well-paid employees, many of whom have left Boulder. So while the planet and Boulder burns, floods, and dies, are we spending money and time for paychecks or carbon reduction? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Next, we have Ramsey Abuita, Robert Love, and Lynn Siegel.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Ramsey Abueta. I work in the clinical research industry, and I live in Boulder. I'm here to speak in favor of Boulder decriminalizing psychedelics, also known as entheogenic plants and fungi. Our society is currently in the midst of a psychedelic renaissance that spans multiple domains of society and culture, including the neuroscience community, the medical and therapy community, the university research community, the arts and music community, the indigenous community, and so much more. The cultural tide is turning, and these substances are becoming more normalized and destigmatized and welcomed back into polite conversation. A few years ago, the New York Times bestselling author Michael Pollan published a book called How to Change Your Mind, which is an excellent example of conversations about these substances entering the mainstream and being regarded with the respect they deserve. Denver has already taken the lead by being the first city to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms almost 3 years ago to this day, and they subsequently published a report outlining the impacts decriminalization has had on the city, and they unanimously agreed that no detrimental effects occurred in the city. 15 other cities around the country, plus the state of Oregon, have decriminalized psychedelics, so we have plenty of precedent that shows that this is the progressive thing to do. Boulder is already a cultural and academic hub for the world of psychedelics, with a large community of visionary and psychedelic artists, such as the Phil Lewis Gallery on Pearl Street, and the Psychedelic Studies program at Naropa University. MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, also conducts clinical trials here in Boulder. Decriminalization will allow Boulder to fully step into its role as a leader for responsible and safe stewardship of these powerful tools for the exploration of consciousness and healing. These substances are impossible to get addicted to, have lots of evidence backing their healing potential, and there's already a thriving legacy community here in Boulder that has cultivated safe containers for the responsible use of these medicines. The time is ripe for decriminalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsey. Next, we have Robert Love, Lynn Siegel, and Evan Ravitz.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Robert Love, PhD. I'm a neuroscientist, and I specialize in helping baby boomers improve their memory and reduce their risk of dementia. Today, I want to share with you some of the current science on psychedelics and why decriminalizing psychedelics here in the city of Boulder will improve the health of Boulder. The current science shows that there are many benefits to psychedelics, specifically for physical health and emotional health. And based upon that data, I believe it is important for the city of Boulder to decriminalize psychedelics so that therapists and patients can use them safely without fear of arrest or criminal prosecution. So this is what some of the top research institutions are saying in the United States. So this is a direct quote from Stanford University's School of Medicine's website that addresses psychedelics. Quote, preliminary data suggests that psychedelic-assisted treatments may be effective for some of our most prevalent, debilitating, and fatal conditions. If ongoing research continues to show efficacy, there may be a public health imperative to advance our understanding and application of these treatments. Johns Hopkins University did research on one of our most important public health challenges, smoking. They found that the use of psilocybin, which is the ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, the active ingredient, the use of psilocybin had a cessation rate of 80%. In other words, those who used psychedelics with a therapist, psilocybin with a therapist, they were able to stop smoking 80% of the time. This is by far the most effective smoking cessation treatment available today. So please consider the science and data and take action to decriminalize psychedelic medicines so that these medicines are safe and accessible for therapists and the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next, we have Lynn Siegel, Evan Ravitz, and Keaton Gray.
I'm waiting for the timer.
Timer's going.
I'm waiting for the timer. Yeah, I've got to see it on my screen. Thank you. Now, well, now it's off the screen. I need the timer on the screen, please.
Lynn, I believe it is.
Now it is. Okay, could you no, now it's not. Waiting for the timer on the screen.
Lynn, this is Brenda. On our end, we have the timer displayed on the Zoom screen, so
That's very nice, but it's not at my end.
you may need to change
I think
your
you need
view
to,
to
what you
gallery.
need to do, this has been going on for months now. Okay,
So-
now there's two images on the screen. Okay, I think you've got it up now, so you can put me on one and the timer on the other. That's good, but you got to restart it.
All right, we'll go ahead and restart. Please go ahead and start speaking, Lynn.
Okay, it's at one minute now. Okay, now, great. Okay, yeah, it's 45 minutes this is supposed to be, and you've got it down, council, to like tonight, 15 minutes. What is this? Is this what you think of your public? You want to hear us for 15 minutes? When there's 8 people signed up, why do you not have 3 minutes? I wonder, like, answer me. No, you're not going to answer. Well, you know, you're talking about video imagery tonight. That should have been done 2 years ago. Go for it, you know. Like, Boulder is so slow, so slow. Okay, now, regards to prairie dogs. There's an issue out at Spine Road development, of course, that Celestial Seasons originally had an agreement that the prairie dogs there would have a habitat preserved for them. In the process of selling it to Haynes and then to the developer Coburn, Bill Holicky, and Andy Allison, and putting in a big development there, suddenly the prairie dogs end up getting sent to Rocky Flats. Well, not good. We did not clean up Rocky Flats. We remediated it, Schoenberg said. That's one of those euphemisms, doublespeak, that is used, in my opinion, in an unconscionable way. Schoenberg and others argue that there are too many unknowns about where plutonium was buried at Rocky Flats and how radiation affects the body. While the action level for plutonium in soil down to 3 feet was 50 picocuries, from 3 to 6 feet, allowable levels were 1,000 to 7,000 picocuries. He said burrowing animals like prairie dogs could dig into the radioactive hotspots and carry the dirt to the surface. He said Colorado's extreme weather, winter Chinook winds, reached 90 miles an hour in the refuge, and a major flood in September 13 was so powerful it changed the courses of many Front Range rivers, could mobilize dangerously contaminated soils. Then we have fires. There's a finite risk.
Lynn, your
It's
time is
low,
up, but thank you for your
we admit,
testimony.
but the consequences are extreme. So no prairie dogs.
Thank you, Lynn. Next, we have Evan Ravitz, Keaton Gray, and Michelle Rodriguez.
Evan Ravitz, North Boulder. Teddy Roosevelt said, "Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people," unquote. That was the case in the Gilded Age of the robber barons, and it's the case now with oligarchs and plutocrats, including in Boulder. The progressive and populist parties' answer back then to the hoarding of money and usurping of power was direct democracy, so citizens could make their own laws and repeal laws made by corrupt politicians. Here's Teddy in 1912.
Fundamental issue of our world. American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves. I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people to rule. I believe that the majority of the plain people of the United States will, day in and day out, make fewer mistakes in governing themselves than any smaller class or body of men, no matter what their training, will make in trying to govern. Again, that the American people are as a whole capable of self-control and to ruin their mistakes.
I've spoken here before about how voters have the incentive to fix our mistakes, unlike politicians who have an incentive to cover up mistakes to protect their careers and their donors' interests. Teddy was right. We're using direct democracy to fix our mistakes and mistakes made by politicians. People, not politicians, are ending our real longest war, the drug war, state by state and substance by substance. We're fixing gerrymandering, low wages, and many other problems.
Evan, your time is up,
politicians.
but thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Next, we have Keaton Gray, Michelle Rodriguez, and Andrew McKenna.
Keaton, I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Keaton, do you want to exit and return and try again? And we'll get back to you after the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hear from Michelle Rodriguez. I hear that Andrew McKenna is not present, so then we'll see if Keaton's available. But Michelle, please go ahead.
Michelle, you should have a mute button now, and if you press it, that will allow you to talk.
Michelle, we're not hearing you, so if you can hit the unmute button, hopefully you can talk and we can hear. All right, well, unfortunately it's not working out, but Michelle, perhaps if you could email us any comments that you were going to speak about tonight so we can hear your testimony in one way or another.
And Keaton Gray has returned.
Okay, let's give Keaton Gray another try. Keaton, you should be able to speak. Oh, I'm afraid we're not hearing you. Brenda, anything else to try?
I'm not sure, Keaton, how we can help you from this end. I do think I am noticing that Michelle is on the phone. So Michelle, you may need to press *6 to unmute on your phone, and then also your phone's mute button. So Michelle, why don't you go ahead and try that? Sorry, Mayor, we don't seem to be able to get either of them tonight.
All right. Well, and Keaton, I'd encourage you as well to email any comments that you were going to give us so that we can still receive them. All right. I guess with that somewhat unsatisfying ending to open comment, we will move on. Apologies for the technical difficulties. All right. So we're moving now to our consent agenda. Elisha, if you could talk us through that, please.
All right, sir. Tonight's consent agenda consists of item A through
Actually,
C.
you know what, Elisha, I got ahead of myself. Since we had such a short open comment period, but did we have any staff responses to the open comment?
I do not believe so. We have at this time. Yeah.
Okay. Anything from council? Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay, sir. Thank you. Again, tonight's consent agenda consists of items A through C.
Yes, Bob.
I would move the consent items, item 3A through 3C.
Thanks.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Did you want to speak to that at all, Bob? All right, I'll just say a comment. Glad that we're going to be able to have Ted Rose continue on the Community Working Group for Stormwater and Flood Master Plan. He's been phenomenal on RAB, and I'm glad he can continue to assist us in that role. All right, if there are no other comments, I believe, Matt?
No, I'll just echo kind of what our mayor just said. I was fortunate enough to actually serve on this working group prior to being elected, and there's a lot of great individuals on this working group, and Ted really stood out, quite exemplary. So I know that report from them is due to come to us quite soon, so allowing him a chance to finish that off and help finish it, I think, is a great opportunity, and it'll be good for the working group and good for the final product.
Right on. All right, seeing none, then I believe it's a show of hands. Yes, sir. All in favor of the motion on the table? Looks like it's unanimous.
8-0. Thank you, sir.
Okay, on to our public hearing then. I think you're muted.
Mike. Next, we have item 5. 5A is the public hearing and consideration of a motion to adopt the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. Planning Board will deliberate and consider a motion for adoption on May 5th. City Council will deliberate and consider a motion for adoption on May 10th.
Very good. And so we'll be welcoming our wonderful planning board virtually with us tonight. I'll just mention the run of show here is that we're going to get a staff presentation. We're going to have the opportunity for council and planning board questions. Then we'll have a public hearing, and then any follow-up questions that come from the public hearing. And then we will not have any comments tonight. We will adjourn at that point, continue the hearing. Planning board will consider a motion for adoption on May 5th, and then City Council will take it back up on May 10th. And with that is now, Cindy, are you going to call the planning board to order here?
Thank you, Mayor Brockett, and thank you, council members. Yes, thank you for having the planning board here tonight. I'm now going to turn it over to, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to our chair, John Gerstle, to call to order the planning board. John?
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Brockett. We'd like to call to order a planning board meeting tonight, May 3rd, 2022, for the purpose of holding a joint public hearing with City Council for consideration of a motion to adopt the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. Planning Board will deliberate and consider a motion for adoption of the plan on May 5th. We have a full board of 7 members in attendance, which constitutes a quorum. Thanks for having us, and I'll now turn the management of this joint meeting back to the mayor to conduct and chair the joint public meeting. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, John. Appreciate that, and very glad to have you and the rest of the board here. I'll just make a note. I'll be taking virtual hands from the planning board and physical hands from the council. So I'm going to be looking all over the place. If I miss somebody, please give me an elbow and notify me of someone that I've missed. I'll do my best. And with that, I'll turn it over to city staff for a presentation.
Great. I haven't been here in a couple of years. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you. I think you're muted.
Just turn your mic on. Is it on the lower? There's a button. It's got a green light.
Oh, it's off. Try again.
Bring it closer. Hello?
There you go.
Okay. Bring it a little closer. All right. Let's see. Does it look all good on everywhere it's supposed to be? Okay, great. So good evening, City Council and Planning Board. It is great to be here with you all tonight as we collectively reach a major milestone on the East Boulder Subcommunity Planning Project. My name is Kathleen King. I'm a city principal planner on the city's comprehensive planning team, and tonight I am joined by my wonderful colleague from Transportation, Jean Sanson, as well as a whole crew of city staff joining online who've been working on the project over the past 3 years and are here tonight to help answer any remaining questions you may have on the final plan. Tonight we have about a 30-minute presentation, and then as described by the mayor and John Gerstle, we will move into clarifying questions. And then I think we've gone over the schedule a couple of times, but we'll be looking forward to deliberation and decision from Planning Board on May 5th and City Council on the 10th.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but planning board members can't see anything. All we see is the words council chambers. And we also can't turn our videos on, so sorry to interrupt.
Sorry about that, Sarah. I will troubleshoot both of those. We've got folks running around here in council chambers trying to solve that first problem for you, and I should be able to fix the other with a setting.
Are we good on all set? Okay. Thanks, Sarah. So we last met with Planning Board on March 31st and City Council on April 12th to present the 90% draft plan and collect your recommendations for changes to the plan for adoption. All of the recommended changes from boards, council, and the community on the 90% draft are listed as long as action taken and can be found in your packets as attachment A. Congratulations to everyone here tonight. We've been meeting, reviewing, reworking, and revising the plan with this board and council over the past 3 years. All of council's and planning board's input, along with input from the Transportation Advisory Board, Housing Advisory Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Open Space and Mountain Parks Board of Trustees, Design Advisory Board, have all provided essential guidance and direction throughout this process. On April 27, the Housing Advisory Board adopted the following recommendation. The Housing Advisory Board unanimously supports the plan and appreciates all the staff and community effort that went into the plan and recommends that Planning Board and City Council adopt the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. The motion for your consideration is to adopt the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan, including the incorporated 55th and Arapahoe Station Area Plan. Subcommunity plans require approval from both Planning Board and City Council. Each body can move to adopt the plan. You can move to adopt the plan with recommended amendments if there are remaining changes to be made, or you can deny adoption of the plan. Subcommunity plans are defined by the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan as a tool to communicate expectations about the future of a subcommunity. They serve as an important bridge between the comprehensive plan and our regulatory framework of zoning and development standards, as well as the capital improvement program. In 2018, City Council approved an update to the city's subcommunity boundaries to better align the boundaries with existing neighborhoods and create defined areas of study for this level of planning. Also in 2018, city staff evaluated all 10 of the city subcommunities to prioritize different areas for study and planning. Council defined the criteria around areas experiencing change. This evaluation identified East Boulder as a top priority for planning, and the project launched in 2019. The East Boulder subcommunity is generally located north of Arapahoe Avenue and east of Foothills. The subcommunity includes around 1,600 acres. This is about 10% of the city's land area. There are 691 parcels, but only around 500 residents who all live in the San Lazaro mobile home community. East Boulder today is a job center supporting over 17,000 jobs, which makes up about 17% of the total jobs in the city. In early 2019, Planning Board and City Council approved the six-phase scope of work for a subcommunity plan. The East Boulder Subcommunity Plan process began with the project kickoff in February of 2019 and has worked its way through the subsequent phases, guided by community input since its launch. This type of engagement was identified for the project as collaborative. This is the highest level of engagement described in the city's engagement strategy and promises to the community that we will work together to formulate solutions and incorporate your recommendations into decisions. One of the key features of this strategy was the East Boulder Working Group. The group began meeting in person on a monthly basis in May of 2019. In March of 2020, we switched to online meetings due to COVID restrictions, and the group has continued to meet, discuss, debate, and inform decision-making throughout the planning process. You met some of these dedicated community members during recent sessions at Planning Board and City Council, and I think the working group may have inspired some to pursue other opportunities to engage with planning. The group included a Planning Board liaison, John Gerstel, a representative from the Boulder Chamber, a representative from Naropa, whose Nalanda campus is just off of 63rd and Arapahoe, 3 local property owners, 7 residents from nearby neighborhoods, including one community connector who lives in San Lazaro, and 8 residents from across other areas of the city. The process and engagement strategy was broken into 3 major stages. Who is East Boulder? What do you want East Boulder to be? And how do we get there? The first stage focused on learning about the people who engage with the area, the spaces across East Boulder, and how the subcommunity performs against citywide goals described in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. We launched the project learning what people loved about the area. Local businesses, Boulder Creek, Valmont Bike Park, and its unique, sometimes described as gritty character. People offered really unique observations, like that East Boulder isn't as windy as downtown, or that it's really easy to connect to other regions because of its close proximity to major arterials, like Flatirons Parkway or East Arapahoe. We also learned what people didn't like. Community members described a lack of internal connections, feeling unsafe at night, and a desire for more amenities and shops. Working group members dispersed throughout the subcommunity to meet community members and collect their input about East Boulder. That information was compiled along with more quantitative analysis of the area in the East Boulder Inventory and Analysis Report. This report studied a wide range of topics from walk access to canopy coverage, rental rates to impacts of the 2013 flood, and many other topics, and served as a basis for the team's understanding of the opportunities in East Boulder. The report was intended to assess whether planning in East Boulder could offer contributions that would move the city towards our major goals around housing affordability and diversity, access and mobility, design quality and placemaking, resilience and climate commitment, local business, and arts and culture. The report identified that there was great potential in all of these arenas, so we moved to the next stage. If we have the potential, what should we do? What changes might we make, and what would that look like? We started by asking the community some basic questions. Would you consider living in East Boulder? We wanted to know if we planned for housing, would anyone want to live here? We asked people in person and online and found that there was an interest from both types of respondents of living in East Boulder. We conducted the in-person questionnaires on site in East Boulder, and so we're able to capture a lot of people who may work in Boulder but live somewhere else. Most of the online respondents were Boulder residents, but some did live in other parts of the community as well. We asked a lot of other questions about transportation, arts, climate, and local business to get a baseline understanding about the types of changes people would be interested in seeing in East Boulder. Then came the big markers. Working group members worked together with staff to consider how to approach changes in East Boulder, identifying areas that could offer strategic change in land use, areas that were important to maintain under current planned uses, and key connections that needed improvements. Those concepts were cycled through working group members across staff from a wide range of city departments and through the community, including boards, council, advocacy groups, neighborhood groups, and school groups. This resulted in the development of 4 concepts, including a no-change concept, which was shared with boards and council in 2021. What was unique about the East Boulder subcommunity planning process, as opposed to other previous long-range planning efforts, is that we did not ask the community to simply choose an option or pick a favorite. We modeled out each different option and asked the community to consider the trade-offs of different land use choices and combinations of land uses in the subcommunity. The engagement for this phase of work took place in the winter of 2021 and was a major engagement window that we had to conduct entirely virtually due to in-person restrictions of COVID-19. We moved our engagement strategy entirely online, creating videos about the different options and trade-offs that community members could watch on demand, collecting input through a Be Heard Boulder questionnaire, and hosting 4 live virtual events where community members could connect with each other, staff, and consultants to discuss the different options and impacts of the plan. I think as staff, we missed the opportunity to connect with community members in person and the spontaneous conversations that can happen over a table with trace paper and maps. But what we found was that people who had never participated in long-range planning projects before were attending our virtual events and completing the questionnaires. We've learned in this process, as have many other communities across the country, that virtual engagement helps to democratize access to meetings and gives people who may not have the time, ability, or option to attend an in-person event to participate when they're able from home. That engagement window provided essential feedback to inform a land use plan for East Boulder. We learned that most people do support the development of some housing in East Boulder, especially affordable and attainable housing. People wanted to see that new housing integrated in mixed-use neighborhoods. There was very little interest in creating residential-only neighborhoods. There was great support for improving quality of life in San Lazaro, and community members provided some guidance around where to locate new housing opportunities near green space. We also learned that the land use plan should preserve and prioritize business space for a variety of businesses, business types and sizes in the subcommunity. Adding more retail to the area is an important consideration, and there was interest in expanding medical uses as well. We also heard a lot about space for business. Community members want to allow some flexibility so that this area can offer opportunities for small businesses to grow and evolve over time while still providing space to host smaller industrial uses and services. A major interest expressed by the community was about increasing the amount and improving the quality of connections throughout East Boulder. And we heard people on both sides of the fence related to the availability of parking. There was also a lot of concern about commuter traffic and managing that as the area grows over time, some recommending mixed-use land use designations as a way to reduce trips. Staff again cycled options and worked to create land use and connections plans that would align with the community's vision, interests, and concerns for the future of East Boulder. We tested options at a variety of scales and worked back and forth across departments with the community and boards and council to deliver the plan that is before you tonight. The first key element that a subcommunity plan includes is a land use plan. The land use plan will be used to update the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Land Use Plan and will guide future decisions about zoning. The land use plan is informed by and balanced with a connections plan. I'm going to talk through some of the key features of the land use plan and how we've updated the plan since we last met a few weeks ago. Jean Sanson will walk through the connections plan and updates we've made to this element. So this is the final land use plan. It incorporates 4 major areas of change where single-use areas of the subcommunity, mainly light industrial, are changed to mixed-use neighborhoods. The plan also includes a new land use designation, mixed-use TOD, or transit-oriented development, which intentionally focuses redevelopment and planned transportation investments to create a denser pocket in East Boulder that is amenity-rich and includes a mix of residential and commercial uses within close proximity to local and regional transportation options. Since we last met, the plan has been updated in response to boards and council feedback, including extending the mixed-use TOD land use category along 55th Street to align with community and working group direction to apply the innovation TOD place type along this corridor, and the redesignation of 5150 Valmont Road from community business to mixed-use residential in response to community input and council feedback. Overall, this graphic describes the overall land use plan and amount of land dedicated to each category. The lighter bars represent acres of land designated in the BVCP, and the darker orange bars indicate how much land area is designated for different types of uses in the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan. Some important issues to note is that there is no change in the amount of land designated for general industrial use. East Boulder is the only subcommunity that includes this land use designation, and as we heard from community members that loss of this land use type was undesirable, the plan maintains all of the space. You may also note that there are some changes in land designated as open space other. We worked closely with staff in OSMP to redesignate some OSO land and clean up mapping errors of the past. Changes to land designated for open space were reviewed and approved by OSBT last summer. Land designated for community business has been changed to mixed-use designations, which do still accommodate the types of neighborhood-serving businesses that are expected in a community business designation. The biggest change, as I've described, is the redesignation of about 290 acres from light industrial use to a mixed-use category. These land use changes support the community's vision for the subcommunity. East Boulder will evolve into a thriving industrial area with interesting places to work, live, play, and do business. This will be achieved by integrating diverse housing and retail options into existing industrial areas. The plan envisions a mix of housing types with access to green space in close proximity to amenities and services, and within a walking distance to bike and multi-use paths, as well as transit stops and workplaces. Redevelopment should be focused on the creation of well-connected neighborhoods that offer social gathering spaces, improved tree canopy, and flexible corridors that can accommodate different uses throughout the day and year. The plan encourages redevelopment that is context-sensitive and looks to our creative architecture community to design innovative places that incorporate strategies for redevelopment, infill, and adaptive reuse of existing structures to create the spaces needed to achieve this vision. Those strategies will be guided by the plan's place types tool, which describes expectations for allowed and conditional uses, usable open space, building character, street level activation, streetscape character, access and mobility, and parking. The tool will be used in future phases of work to perform zoning updates, code changes, and the development of a form-based code. Based on community feedback, a number of updates have been made to this section of the plan in the last few weeks, including adding housing as a use on ground floors in Parkside Residential, Innovation TOD, and Neighborhood TOD place types, providing a recommended range for floor area ratios in the station area place types, updating language around parking to better align with the goals of the TMP, and updating expectations for the provision and long-term maintenance of urban canopy. When we work to understand how these place types will play out over the next 20 years, community members have expressed interest in two major metrics: the number of potential residents that can be accommodated under the plan and the number of jobs that may result from land use changes. The East Boulder Subcommunity Plan anticipates growth in both residential population and number of jobs. This growth is expected to occur over a 20-year horizon and is dependent on the motivation of private property owners to pursue redevelopment envisioned in the plan. The plan anticipates that the land use changes could result in significant increase in the amount of housing that could be provided in the area. We understand that changes could accommodate around 5,000 new units and a population of about 12,000 people. The plan also increases the variety of business types that could be located in East Boulder and the amount of space that those businesses could occupy. It anticipates around 20,400 jobs may be located here by 2040. That mix of new homes and new jobs is envisioned to take creative design approaches, where outdoor space is highly valued, a variety of roof lines create memorable scenes throughout East Boulder, and the combination of places are highly accessible. With that in mind, I will turn it over to Jean to talk about the Connections Plan.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can you all hear me? I jokingly told Kathleen I was here just so she could take a break and a breath. Good evening. So the Connections Plan, this plan is intended to support the transformations of land use and the mix of residents and businesses and visitors that Kathleen has just described. And transitioning from a car-dominated environment to one where active travel options are convenient and they're comfortable and safe and affordable requires two things. It requires new connections and it requires enhancements to our existing transportation network. This plan creates 12 new connections to improve safety and connectivity throughout East Boulder by creating walkable blocks, improving access into and through these redevelopment areas, as well as expanding the pedestrian and bicycle network. In addition to these new connections, upgrades to key streets in East Boulder will improve safety and encourage travel by transit, foot, bike, or micromobility. And these range in scale from completing missing sidewalks in East Boulder to initiating design of the 55th Street corridor to incorporate protected bicycle facilities. In conjunction with these infrastructure enhancements to be installed by property owners as part of redevelopment and through city projects, the plan includes a number of supportive strategies like managed and paid parking and the management of curbside space to allow for goods delivery, passenger loading, and even more flexible uses like parklets. Next slide, please. One of the refinements that we've made to the connections plan based on board and council feedback in the last few weeks and that we're most excited about is that we've more intentionally incorporated shared street design into the 55th and Arapahoe area to prioritize active travel. So shared streets basically support environments where there's high pedestrian activity and lower vehicle demand and slower speeds. And so the design that you see here allows the street to function as a shared space for people to socialize or travel or shop or dine or recreate and to better balance the needs of pedestrians, bicyclists, and low-speed motor vehicles. And as I referenced in the previous slide, the design also allows access for passenger drop-off and pickup and truck loading and unloading of goods. And that's going to be an important function in this area as it will continue to include businesses and expanded commercial uses. Next slide. So transit, over time, enhanced regional transit service, including bus rapid transit along East Arapahoe, connecting Boulder to our neighboring cities to the east and I-25, and expanded local transit service like the extension of the HOP circulator into East Boulder will offer convenient travel options for people living, working, and visiting East Boulder.
Excuse me, Jean, can you speak a little louder?
Oh,
or can
yes.
the volume be adjusted up a little bit?
Let me speak into, is this better, John? Can you hear me better? Okay. Yeah, closer to the mic, thank you. Thanks for that. So, that said, RTD provides most of the public transportation in the Boulder area, and today the organization is facing serious financial challenges. And we fully recognize this challenge, and the city will continue to explore, in coordination with RTD, as well as with other regional and state partners, ways to provide regional bus rapid transit service to East Boulder, which may include alternative operator partnerships. So more broadly speaking, when we think about transit as a component, and it's a very important component of creating mobility hubs throughout East Boulder, we think of it as one part of a larger system where options for families to bike, walk, and take transit feel safe, vibrant, and welcoming. Next slide, please. So zooming out even further, one of the most important benefits of a well-integrated land use and connections plan in East Boulder is the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, particularly from the transportation sector. Results show that by creating more opportunities to make trips closer to home and giving people a greater range of travel options like walking and biking to jobs and services, per capita GHG, or greenhouse gas emissions, is 28% less than if current trends continue. And this analysis, I will note, is the same methodology that our Climate Initiatives Department does as part of their GHG inventory each year, but has been isolated for East Boulder. And what this data proves out is the benefits of a well-connected, walkable, and bike-friendly transportation system paired with a mix of land uses goes well beyond mobility and quality of life enhancements to truly help our community move the needle toward our broader climate goals. So thank you, and with that, I will turn it back to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Jean. So the final stage of the planning process, oop, boy, this is sensitive. There we go. The final stage of the planning process surrounds the topic of how. Now that we have a vision, how do we achieve it? And this is one of my favorite components of the plan. Throughout the course of the process, we received hundreds of ideas for policies, programs, and projects that could help East Boulder evolve. And I really mean there were hundreds and hundreds. I know that people worry that when they submit comments during a process like this, that maybe they don't go anywhere. But I just want to assure everyone that we read every single idea. And as part of the collaborative engagement strategy, we evaluated all of those ideas for alignment with the BVCP, alignment with other city master plans and strategy documents, feasibility, and the idea's ability to achieve multiple benefits. We took those ideas and funneled them into recommended policies, programs, and projects that can help East Boulder achieve the vision outlined in the subcommunity plan. In my career, I've never gone to this extent to incorporate community feedback into the final recommendations before, and just it was really rewarding, and I think it's just very exciting. So it's not the most colorful part of the plan, but I think it's my favorite part of the plan. Overall, the plan represents a vision honed through community engagement over a 3-year period. Over 2,000 people participated in the process. Balancing the input was challenging, but we hope that everyone who participated sees their mark in the document at some level. To move the project towards implementation, the next steps for East Boulder include plan adoption, hopefully soon. Next, land use changes to the BVCP land use map. As soon as the plan is adopted, we can move forward with the public notice process and begin working on these changes, which we would hope to complete this summer. We would also work on making those connections updates to the transportation master plan when that goes for its next update. And then as our department begins to restaff our team, we're hoping to work on code updates, zoning recommendations, and form-based code work to implement the plan later this year. And that is it for the presentation. Thank you again for your collaboration on the project. And I know we have staff available to respond to clarifying questions. Just so staff knows, I can't see Zoom or Teams or anything, so feel free to jump in if you're out there.
I can't, so.
Okay,
all right.
Great.
Well, Kathleen and Jean, thank you so much for that extremely informative and concise, really, truly a wonderful presentation. And I'll thank you and everyone else who's been involved in this for the incredible work on this project. We'll say that a number of times before we're done with adoption, but just want to get that in there pretty quickly. All right, so now it's our chance to ask staff questions. So council or planning board, I welcome you to raise your physical or virtual hand and get some questions out there. Junie.
Thank you, Aaron. I just have a question on slide 43. When you were talking about the scenarios and the amount of residents and employees, did you say, for instance, for the East Boulder sub-community plan, the 12,500 would be over 20 years period? I think that's what I heard.
Yeah, so that anticipates the full build out of the plan.
Okay. So I think part of my question, or at least my first question is, you mentioned 20 years. How about 5 to 10 years from now? What does the area look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, just anecdotally, we know that there is a lot of interest in redevelopment at 55th and Arapahoe in particular. And so as we think about, what areas might change sooner than later, that would be an area I would anticipate seeing some change in the near term. As far as being able to project the number of units that might happen in the next 5 years, it's really hard to know that without knowing which properties are going to turn over and sell and redevelop. So I don't have that data.
And also, I have a question that might be a Teresa question. What would prevent another? We're really working hard here to make this happen, and looking at this project over the next 20 years, what would stop a council, let's say 4 years from now, there's a change on council, and the council wants to go another direction?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Joseph. It would have to be the will of council. I'll tell you, master plans, sub-community plans tend to be our guiding documents, and in that vein, garner a lot of deference from subsequent councils. There are also people who will have relied on this plan for their property interest, and so that would be another deterrent to council changing its mind.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Got questions from Sarah Silver and John Gerstle, and then we'll go to council.
Thanks so much. So Kathleen, I'm going to follow up on the back and forth that you and I have been having about the jobs projections.
Mm-hmm.
When we met at planning board, you told us that the jobs projections for the Flatirons Park area was based on the assumption of I think it's 480 square feet per employee, because that's the current light industrial ratio that you use. But we know that that area also will allow office space, and that ratio is 230 square feet per employee. So I'm curious if you could unpack for us what your formula was in terms of what percentage of jobs you measured out as office and what percentage were measured out as light industrial, because I think the numbers that you projected should reflect some combination of those two, since both types of uses will no doubt be implemented over time in that area.
Yeah, so for the overall projections for jobs, for each of the areas of change, we actually took a pretty fine-grained approach and developed concepts that were modeled, and the job projections are measured by space. And so we modeled out, we're anticipating so much light industrial space, so much retail space, so much office space, and then did calculate jobs based on that. Can I still share my screen? Is that an option? Well, I can? Okay. Because I have the numbers for folks if that's of interest. Okay. So we did model out the different spaces, and then we used these multipliers to calculate a total jobs number. When we were at planning board in March, there was a request that we put together a projection that could anticipate or would model what the absolute maximum build out would be. So we looked at, I think it's all maybe 70 parcels in Flatiron Business Park, and built a model to measure those. And because we don't know, we didn't design on a parcel by parcel level what that space mix might include. We used a general 490 square foot per job multiplier, because that is the amount of square foot per job that's in Flatiron Business Park today. And if Kalani's on the line, I just would have her check and make sure I describe that appropriately.
And then can I follow up after you check with Kalani?
Sure.
Did Kalani give a thumbs up to that, or is she still checking?
I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out one of my buttons. Looks like it's missing. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So,
Great.
yeah, that looks good.
So, okay, so I appreciate, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, just a follow-up, please. So you're calculating the job projections for the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan as if everything that's going to get built there is going to be light industrial, except that we actually know that that's not the case, because we already have an example of that at 2400 Central Avenue. So might it be possible at planning board on Thursday to just do a couple scenarios, like half light industrial, half office space, and job projections for that, so that we can actually understand what the different mixes might be in terms of the jobs and dwelling units combo that is likely to emerge out of this project.
Sure. I just want to correct one statement. We did not apply that 490 square foot per job across all of East Boulder. That was just for that Flatiron Business Park exercise. For
Yes,
the other areas of change, we did.
I did understand that, but that Flatirons Business Park is where the most there's. We know that it just got purchased for a great deal of money and is likely to be targeted for redevelopment pretty quickly. So I think it would just be helpful, at least be helpful to me, to have a little bit more mix in there than the assumption of all light industrial work ratio space. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. John Gerstle, then we'll have some council members, and then Lisa Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Could you go into some further detail about your assumptions about the increased housing numbers that you came up with respect to distribution between, say, missing middle and stacked flats and other types of housing that you used to develop your estimates?
Yeah, so we took a similar approach with the housing units. We actually went into each of the areas of change and used the place type tool as a guide to develop a potential scenario for how that might play out. And then that is what you'll see in the plan for each of those sections on areas of change in neighborhoods. That mix that's included in that is what was modeled. And we do have, I think I'll call to Kalani again if you want to describe the maybe the spread of unit sizes that we looked at to model out that mix.
Sure. So we looked at units, everything from about 350 square foot efficiency units, all the way to a variety of attached single family that includes lip work, and that includes 2 apartment styles, flat style apartments in there also, and all of those were based on the 2019 census data average square footage for those units.
Kalani, thanks for that. Do you mind introducing yourself to the public?
Hi, I'm Kalani Poho. I work in the planning department.
Thanks. Go ahead, John.
Okay. If I can just follow up on that. So can you describe how many units, say, were garden apartments or duplexes or flats of various sizes?
I'd have to look at just in general across every area of change, or specific to certain areas of change?
No, in general, because I think you and your colleagues introduced numbers for the entire area of the sub-community plan. So just to aggregate it at that level would be interesting.
I can look that up for you, but Kathleen, do you have that, the whole mix of the units, the percentages offhand? If not, if you give me a second, I'll take a look for that.
I don't have that mix. I don't have a slide for that.
If you give me 1 minute, I'll take a look and get that mix for you.
Thanks, Kalani.
All right. So John, we'll come back to that. But we'll move on to another question. I saw some hands over here. Nicole, and then Matt.
Thanks again for the presentation. It was super helpful, as well as this very comprehensive document and all the work you've done. My question is referring to slide 48 in the presentation. And it's just the one that's playing out the greenhouse gas emissions. And I apologize for not sending this in advance. I didn't catch it until you were going through the presentation here. My question is, it looks like overall greenhouse gas emissions are going up, right? Just because there's more people, right? So per capita it's going down, but overall going up. And, I'm thinking about this in regard to our community greenhouse gas emissions goals. It seems like that's going to be sending us in the wrong direction. And so I'm just wondering, what are some of the thoughts around how we can overall lower greenhouse gas goals to be in line with our community goals in this area. If that's just something that will evolve over the next few years, or what's the thinking there?
Yeah, I would be happy to address that, Councilwoman Spear, from a transportation perspective. So you're right, there's more activity in East Boulder. In 20 years, there'll be more people living there and more people working there. And so as a result, the total GHG, and this comes from an analysis of vehicle miles traveled, right? And so there are things that we can do. And I think that some of the estimates that we use, so for example, we apply a 20% reduction to generally, industry-specific standards for how many trips a certain use generates. And we know that people in Boulder travel differently than that because we have higher mode shifts in our community than we do in typical more suburban communities. So we apply that. And then on top of that application, we apply another 10% reduction, which we actually think might be fairly conservative because there are other things that we can do that we know will move that needle even further. So for example, as we think about improvement districts, we can require that eco passes or micro mobility, or it's not micro mobility, but what am I trying to say? Scooter sharing, I know. Passes are put in the hands of the residents in these communities as well as the employees. So there are a number of travel demand management strategies and tools that we can use to change how people travel, and quite frankly, an investment in these other travel options, because we can do, only so much through managing that demand, and then it's becoming incumbent on us to provide that infrastructure and the services that we need for people to conveniently travel differently. So, it's twofold. It's the incentives, and then it's also the requirements to provide those capital and infrastructure investments that we need. And we actually think, based on that this is a fairly conservative estimate and will probably play out differently as time moves on. Yeah.
Great. We'll do Matt, and then Tara, and then Lisa Smith.
Thanks, Mayor, and staff, thank you for the presentation. It's great to see the evolution of this over time, and I think setting a course for our future is quite important, and certainly it's great to have Planning Board here. It's nice to be able to sort of walk through this together this evening. My question centers around a letter we sort of recently got with regards to Cordon Pharma and its proximity to the mixed-use, transit-oriented development that's south of the tracks but north of Western Avenue, and really kind of thinking about the appropriateness of housing that close to a pretty heavy industrial use and business that is loud, it operates 24/7, has large lighting. And so I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on whether that was considered in the close proximity with regards to that space north of Western Avenue to the train tracks, and whether housing is an appropriate use there versus maybe having a more transitional zoning to perhaps the well-needed housing. Don't get me wrong, we need housing, but in that specific spot, I'm just wondering, given that Cordon Pharma's close proximity, if that's the most appropriate use of housing in that space.
Yeah, we looked at that area in particular related to some feedback that we've gotten from Cordon recently, and still believe that having housing there would be an appropriate use and help to create the type of neighborhood that we're looking for at 55th and Arapahoe. But we have talked about some strategies that could help manage that interaction and create more of a buffer. So one of the things that we talked about is as we look at and start working on code updates and form-based code and design guidance for this area in particular, looking for a larger setback from the rail along the parcels there. We're also talking about ways that we could step back the upper floors of buildings so that there wouldn't be as much of an interaction or view into the Cordon Pharma site, but that all I think needs further study as well.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I hear that Kalani has the requested housing numbers, so maybe we could get that before
excellent.
going on to further questions.
Hi, thank you again. So as requested, we have small studios. Well, existing mobile homes is one housing type in the plan, small studios. which is 350 square feet or less, efficiency units. Then mid-size apartments, approximately between 500 and 1,200 square feet. Large apartments from 1,200 to 1,800 square feet, townhomes, and then live work. And the mix is primarily, it's 20% small studios, mid-size apartments, about 70%, large apartments, 2%, townhomes, 3%, and then live work, about 1%. And the individual numbers, if you need that, it's about 1,000 small efficiency units, about 3,500 mid-size apartments, about 100 large apartments, and about 150 townhomes, and 75 live work units. So if that helps clear that up.
Kalani, could you email that information to all of us? Would you mind?
I don't mind at all. Let me take a screenshot of this and I'll send it on over.
Thanks. John, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was very useful. When you talk, just a quick follow-up, when you talked about the percentage, are you talking about number of units or total area devoted, living area devoted to that in the sub area, in our entire sub area?
So just the units, the percentage of the mix of overall units, so the total out of the 5,100 approximately units, that's the percentage.
Okay, well, thank you.
Great. Tara, then Lisa, and then I'll call on myself.
Hi, Jean and Kathleen. Thank you for that very great presentation, and thanks for talking to me today. Earlier, that was fun. So my first question is Jean, you mentioned that we cannot rely on RTD, and we know that we can't. We obviously have a transit village with very little transit, and we're trying not to duplicate that. Although it doesn't sound like we will, because we have a lot going on at Arapahoe and 55th as far as transit options. So I would rather not, as everybody else here would rather not rely on RTD, as they have broken promises in the past. When do you think we can expect the regional transit? Do you have you been talking to the different communities, the different cities? What do they say? What are the odds that we can really have this, or is it just a pipe dream?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sure on the minds of many of us. Can you hear me? Okay. I really have to put my mouth on this. That is a really great question. So yeah, I think that, we are all of the same mind that we need to look at options that go beyond RTD. We know that there are certain commitments that they've made to us that we will continue to advocate for to restore transit service within our community. But when we look at expanding the transit service that we need beyond that in 5, 10, 15 to 20 years, we need to be creative and look at alternative options. So we are having conversations with Boulder County, our partners within the county and our neighboring jurisdictions, to look at what those options might be. And it could be everything from continuing to submit things like applications for federal funding to begin to pilot regional transit service, which we're hoping to do this coming year, to putting out RFPs for other types of operators. CDOT is very much getting in the game of providing transit service between cities, intercity transit service, like a Mustang type service. So there are options, and we're getting more and more focused as we have these conversations with our partner agencies to determine what that might look like. I don't have a crystal ball. I would say that if we are successful in receiving some of the federal funds that we're requesting, we could see service as soon as the next 2 to 5 years. But I believe that that is hopeful thinking. I wouldn't say it's wishful.
Okay, and my second question, thank you. Perfect. And my second question is, some people have been writing to us in regards to what they would like to see who weren't included in the let's say, in the community that worked on the plan. And they mentioned supermarkets and more restaurants. At what point do we ever get to weigh in on that as council? I'm sorry, I don't know that. Or as communities that are adjacent to 55th and Arapahoe particularly, like let's say south of there. So at what point are we going to be getting into the nitty-gritty details about what will go there? I'm thinking about inviting buildings versus large, big, cold structures, et cetera. Because I would love it to be a community gathering place.
Yeah, so what we're looking at in our work plan in the planning department right now is that as long as we're able to staff up over the next couple of months, we would take on zoning updates, code updates, and the potential development of form-based code for the 55th and Arapahoe area in particular later this year. And so once we get into that process, that will involve a myriad of code work, but certainly work on the use tables and that form-based code development. Those processes will, again, include an engagement process. So there'll be opportunities to continue that conversation and for people to weigh in.
Good enough?
Yeah.
Okay, we got Lisa, then myself, and then Mark. And then Laura.
Thank you. So I'm going to follow up on Councilmember Weiner's excellent question on transportation. So I know you talked about alternate operator partnerships and options for regional transportation. And forgive me if this has already been covered, but I was just curious how you envision additional needs for transit within the city itself. You know, so what do you anticipate needing to do in terms of budgeting for that and so on? I know we do a lot with the hop, the skip, and the jump and other services that go above and beyond what RTD currently offers us within the city boundaries. And how do you envision that happening and when? I know that with new development, and we may have some increased density or quite a bit of increased density here, it can be a little chicken and the egg, but what's the vision for that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So in thinking about how we provide more localized transit, again, we do continue to rely on RTD to provide, you know, the 200 series, for example, but we supplement that with partnerships with CU and others to provide the HOP circulator, which we hope to extend into East Boulder in the coming years. We had plans to do that pre-COVID. We've since pivoted how those federal funds were used to help to electrify the HOP vehicles that we currently have. But our long-range plan is to still continue to work towards expanding that HOP into East Boulder. You know, another option that we've been considering of more recent times with COVID and the different ways that people are traveling is thinking about the HOP as perhaps a more flexible route, so more of a micro transit service. So if you can imagine sort of like a Lyft line or an Uber pool, but with larger vehicles for transit, we're starting to think about how to pilot things like what they call micro transit in East Boulder. But in the meantime, I will say that we continue to advocate very strongly to restore the services, the fixed route services that RTD has provided into East Boulder. And, you know, quite frankly, like we've seen service spans shortened, we've seen frequencies lengthened, and, you know, that's having real impacts on how people, particularly like when you think about the San Lazaro mobile home community, have access to transit in this community. So we're taking many different angles on this problem to move forward.
Thank you. And then one other question while I have the floor. Well, first a compliment. I'm very excited to hear about form-based code and use table work coming up. My nerdy planning heart is delighted. And then I just also something that has come up for us quite a bit in past planning board meetings, and which I'm sure members of staff have heard me harp on a bit, is just kind of an understanding of industrial space and how that's changing across the city. So, you know, looking at this East Boulder, you know, planning area and what we're doing with that, but also understanding how those changes to light industrial, the incoming you know, new housing, all the different uses that are showing up, what that's doing to our overall industrial space in general. And so I guess I'd just like to again ask, I know I was reassured recently by planning staff, I think, I don't know, 6 or 7 meetings back that's on the docket when there's resources and people power available. But is that still something you're looking at? And how might that inform this plan specifically, this area specifically moving forward?
Yeah, as part of this process, we've certainly studied some of the national trends on industrial space and how the need for industrial space has been growing, but also looking at how we know industrial space is being repurposed and reused in East Boulder. There is a recommendation in the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan to conduct that industrial land study so we can dive deeper into understanding how our industrially designated lands are being used today and how we can anticipate they would change in the future. So that is a recommendation.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call on myself. I wanted to look at page 40, slide 42 in the presentation, if you don't mind. And it was the place types one with showed the different uses and the different place types. If that's very good. Thanks so much. All right, so I appreciate the modifications that you made from last time. I did notice that there are 3 of them that are grayed out, and I wonder if that was intentional and what that means. It's like on the Innovation TOD on the 2nd floor, for the residential, and then the Innovation TOD non-residential on the 1st floor.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We don't have that in the key, and it is significant. That indicates that it would be a conditional use as opposed to the fully saturated icons, which are an allowed use.
Got it. So just a quick comment, it'd be helpful to get that in the key in the plan, because I didn't see that in the plan. I may have missed it. And let me just ask then, on Innovation TOD residential, you've got conditional for residential on the 2nd floor, but not the 1st and the 3rd through 5th. Am I reading that right?
You are correct, and I think that that's a graphic error that we can change.
Okay, great. That makes sense. All right, thanks for that. The other one was I saw that you changed the minimum FARs to a range, which I thought made sense, as a flexibility thing. But you changed the minimum from, I think it was 3 or more to 1, which was a pretty drastic drop. So just wondering why you're thinking about dropping it that far down as opposed to like 2 for a minimum.
Yeah, so we met back up with our consultant team, MIG, to talk about those. And I think that we had, in the last version of the plan, actually had just an incorrect descriptor. Those were meant to be maximum FARs. But because they received such positive feedback from council and some community members in our last online questionnaire, we put in that range to really start to think about minimum FARs. So an error that resulted in an opportunity.
Okay, very interesting. Well, we'll talk about it at our hearing next week, but thanks for that explanation. All right, that's all I had. So I've got now Mark and then Laura and then George from the planning board, and then we'll come back over to council. Is that all right? And then Leonard, I'll get to you after that. But Mark?
Hi, thanks. So I am a Transportation Advisory Board veteran and a Planning Board newbie. And one of the lessons I have learned is that in site review and in our plans, and this is a great example, we have visions and we have desired goals and outcomes, but when it comes down to site review and what gets constructed on the ground, we resort to the code and our design and construction of the DCS, which guides actual street construction, how wide streets are, where there's parking, how tall curbs and gutters are. And we have long undergone an attempt to revise our DCS. My question is for Kathleen and or Jean to realize the greenhouse gas reduction goals as stated in the East Boulder Subcommunity Plan, to reach our Vision Zero goals in the TMP. To do this, how reliant are we on completing a DCS update so that as things are redeveloping in East Boulder right now, and as they redevelop, we're using the current DCS, not a forward-looking updated DCS. And so how important and how integral is that to achieving our East Boulder Subcommunity Plan vision?
I might ask Charles Farrow to describe where the DCS update process is, and maybe it would be helpful if you could also describe how that kind of exchange and back and forth between sub-community plans and existing code works when projects come through site review.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I know we have other folks from, well, first Charles Farrell, Planning and Development Services, and I know we have other folks from Transportation on the call this evening. I know that an update on the DCS amendments is scheduled for Planning Board here in June, I believe. So work is ongoing. And Kathleen, I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question, just the relationship between current regulations and how we implement.
Yeah, and how maybe sub-community plans would be referenced in site review.
Sure. Well, so one of the site review criteria talks about consistency with adopted area plans. So it's absolutely one of the main things that we're reviewing for when we review discretionary projects that are situated in areas that have adopted area plans. So those are very well honored through the site review process. But I guess what I would say in response, Board Member McIntyre, is that we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us in drafting the form-based code to help implement the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan. And I would agree, I don't know that there's a lot of value in adopting a plan that we don't have the tools to implement in detail. So as we move into the form-based code, I think all of those things are absolutely on the table so that we're implementing consistent with the adopted goals and policies in the plan. And I think we've seen that through the Transit Village Area Plan, the North Boulder Sub-Community Plan, where we really wrote specific zoning, to honor the spirit, intent, goals, and policies of the plan. So I don't know if any of my other colleagues in transportation want to comment on the DCS at this point, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I think you covered it well, Charles.
Good enough, Mark? Okay, great. Laura?
Thank you. So I'll try to be quick because I know we have a lot of folks here. So the last time this plan came to City Council was the 90% draft. And there was a request to see where you could incorporate more housing. Could you please describe specifically what changes were made to the 100% draft since the 90% draft to incorporate more housing, and how many units you think that added?
Yeah, so we looked specifically at the place types and tried to find opportunities where we could incorporate more housing units. And so considering allowed uses on ground floors where previously we were looking for maybe a more active use was updated. And so when we look at how that impacts the numbers of units, we haven't calculated that, but just kind of based on experience, I would imagine it would be just a couple hundred units. Not just, every unit counts, it would be significant.
And that was just to the hands-on industrial place type, right? Or no, sorry, not the hands-on industrial, the Main Street Live Work.
Main Street Live Work and Innovation TOD, and I think Neighborhood TOD as well.
I think those had ground floor residential in the 90% draft, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll have to look back. I don't have a printout of attachment A, but that is described in attachment A.
Okay, thank you. And would you say that you feel as staff that you have maximized the opportunity to add housing and that there's nothing else that you would recommend as staff to increase housing?
I think that the plan balances the community's desire to incorporate housing in strategic locations with the community's desire to preserve space for business uses and preserve space for industrial. I would not characterize it as maximizing the amount of housing.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. I have just a couple more quick questions. And this may be me being a planning board newbie, but I'm uncertain what would govern the maximum building heights in East Boulder. I know the mixed use TOD is a new land use designation, and I'm not sure if that's what governs maximum heights, but just curious, what is the guidance that planning board would use to think about maximum height and then any height for community benefit in these areas of mixed use TOD land use designation and mixed use industrial land use designation? Or is it the place types?
Yeah, so citywide, the maximum height is 55 feet no matter what. So you can depend on that. And then when we go and do the zoning updates, we will look at building heights as part of both form-based code and other code updates for this area, and that would provide a maximum building height. But I do think that we're going to remain pretty dependent on the community benefit as a tool. And so right now, most of this area is zoned for industrial, which has a maximum height of 40 feet. But we'll consider that when we start looking at code updates.
And is that the same for the mixed use industrial designation? Is the 40 foot is the standard maximum, and to go above that up to 55, you'd need community benefit?
So the mixed use industrial is a land use and not a zone. So I might ask Kalani or Charles. I think some of the zones that are in a mixed use industrial neighborhood might be like IS1 or IS2. I don't know offhand what the building height limit is for those zones.
Typically 40 to 45 feet. But again, I think something that we would look at as part of the drafting of the form-based code as an implementation tool. And, anything that would go over, the minimum height, I think we could talk about how community benefit plays into that.
So am I understanding that what we're being asked to adopt with the subcommunity plan right now, we don't actually know what the height limits will be in these different place types or land use designations, that's going to be a next stage with zoning?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's something that we'll have to determine through the drafting of the form-based code.
And I think just for context, the conversation of building heights was robust in community conversations and among the working group. And the feedback that we got from both groups is an interest in providing flexibility and I would say not wanting to limit a building height greater than what is already limited by our code. So that's just some kind of background information.
Thank you, that's useful. And then if I could have the floor for just one more minute. Looking at policy D7, it encourages varied roof lines and integrating mechanical equipment into overall building architecture. And this is something that just came before our planning board in a concept review with a building in an industrial zone that was asking for additional height in order to not have flat roofs with screened mechanical equipment. And so I'm wondering if having this policy D7 in the subcommunity plan, which as Charles noted, you want consistency with subcommunity plans when you're doing a site review, would that language in the subcommunity plan be considered a rationale or a criterion for additional height during a site review?
Kalani, could you respond?
Hi, Kalani Pahoa. I'll also probably ask Charles to weigh in here, but yes, it does help with getting some varied roof lines to have that extra height in there. So there's a couple ways we could do it. In the form-based code, there's different building types. Those building types have floors, they have floor thresholds, they have roof requirements. So that could be part of the form-based code. As far as the site review, Charles, I would ask, when we're looking at that, is that the mechanical screening, is that something we could do in site review? Or is that something we would want to handle in form-based code as a mechanical screening requirement?
Yeah, I think ultimately we would probably want to study the typology of the buildings to better understand, what the roof forms would look like. But, through other form-based codes that we've done recently, like out at 30 Pearl, we've tried to incentivize pitched roofs and try to incentivize screening mechanical equipment and embedding them within buildings. But again, ultimately, I think it comes down to the building typologies and how we draft the form-based code to respond to that.
I'm too much of a planning board newbie to fully understand that, but maybe I'll follow up offline for my own education. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Laura. So, Mr. Boone, do you mind starting by clarifying your preferred pronunciation of your first name? I don't want to get it wrong.
Oh, you can call me whatever. George, Georgie. People call me all kinds of things.
All right. I've called you both in the
you
past.
Call me what you'd like me to. Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be fine.
Thank you.
So, kind of follow up on Laura's question a bit. In regards to light industrial zoning and what exists in this area today, the staff took us through a really nice comprehensive tour. I think all of council on planning board and transportation advisory were able to participate that, and that was really great to provide context. One of the things that staff was talking about as we walked through there, especially at the beginning of the tour, was around some of the light industrial uses that currently exist, like the banjo maker and the art space and the RV outfitter. In contrast, the project that Laura mentioned that planning saw just on Tuesday was a redevelopment of a light industrial zone from a restaurant supply to a light industrial lab space, quite large, 120,000 feet. And my understanding after that was that space is going to be marketed somewhere at about $60 to $80 a square foot triple net, or roughly about, when you calculate all the costs in, about $100 a square foot gross. And so to give people context on what that means, 1,000 square feet would rent for gross about $100,000 a year. And so when we play that in contrast to the existing light industrial uses that we're proud of in this area, like the banjo maker and the RV outfitter, where do they fit in this plan as it develops? And has the city put some thought and economic analysis as relates to these types of businesses that are thriving in the area because it's inexpensive, and where those businesses might fit in this plan?
Yeah, so I think that the types of businesses you're describing are really what's envisioned to be incorporated into those hand-on industrial place type areas. That's really what I think we've heard from a lot of people in the community that is very important to how this neighborhood evolves. We had a market profile done for the 55th and Arapahoe Station area, and it did look broader into East Boulder as well. And I think that market report was really helpful because it did dispel some I think perceptions that we had about affordability of space. We learned that rents in this area are not necessarily cheaper than other parts of Boulder. Rents are going up, but I do think we've heard anecdotally from community members it's a more affordable area today. We have not done additional economic analysis on how redevelopment might impact those rental rates since that initial market profile.
Okay, is that something that we're intending to do as a city? Because I guess I have some substantial concerns from what we're seeing coming through these areas in planning board. For instance, the project I mentioned that came through on Tuesday, they're looking at $60 to $80 a square foot, and they're comping against the national market and feeder areas like Boston and San Diego that are already at $100 a square foot for that light industrial. And I have some concerns around how we manage that as a city to preserve the types of businesses that exist. So hopefully there's a plan around that.
That type of study is not described as a recommendation in the sub-community plan, but I may ask Chris Jones or Jennifer Pinsino if they are in the Zoom world to comment and let us know about any next steps that community or economic vitality might be working on.
Thank you, Kathleen. We do not have any imminent affordable commercial work plan elements. Oh, sorry, Chris Jones, Interim Director of Community Vitality. But we do have some resources within the CAGED budget to be looking at possibly in the year ahead to pilot some possibilities around affordable commercial that could be looked to as a model as East Boulder develops to resolve some of these challenges. And I see Jennifer Pinsino has turned her camera on as well, so I will see if she has additional to contribute.
I would say one of the things that we're planning to do is updating the economic sustainability strategy that City Council adopted in 2013. And certainly affordable commercial would be something that we would be looking at as we do that update.
Thanks. And Jennifer, can you introduce yourself for the public?
Sorry,
please?
Jennifer Pinsino, City Manager's Office.
Thanks. Georgie, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. We got Lauren next, and then Matt.
Thank you. So most of my questions are sort of around the next steps, and just to make sure that some of the things that I'm concerned about would be able to be taken care of in future processes. So as we look at zoning and form-based code, is it the intention to have new zoning districts that would apply to this area, or are we trying to map current zoning onto this plan?
Yeah, I think we will be looking at whether there are existing zones that could be suitable for any as a match for any of these place type areas, but we would also study the creation of new zones and if that's a better kind of tool to get what we're describing as the vision for the area.
And as we go to look at those code and zoning and use updates, do you foresee having implementing any kind of types of controls to ensure that we're maintaining a certain amount of industrial space? You know, for instance, if office space is more seen as being able to be more valuable to a developer, it seems like all of these zones either allow residential or office. And so if for some reason it wasn't, you could see things being redeveloped away from industrial uses potentially, depending on the market conditions.
Yeah, I think when we go into those conversations, that would definitely be something that Planning Board and City Council would weigh in on in the future. If there were certain uses that you may want to prohibit in these zones.
Thank you. And then lastly, we've gotten some concerns around sort of noise, lighting, those kinds of things. Right now, do we have any difference in standard in terms of the amount of noise or light pollution that can be created in these zones compared to the rest of Boulder? Or currently it's sort of the citywide rules are the same all across the city, right? So
I would ask Charles to respond to that about light regulations.
Yeah, as far as lighting goes, the city's lighting code is pretty uniform across the city. I think we do have, some little more intense allowances for our commercial and industrial areas, but on the whole, still require full cutoff fixtures, no light intrusion on other people's property. And with regard to noise, we have some specific standards in our regulations that talk about construction typology for residential uses in industrial zones. So things like additional soundproofing, ways to achieve that either with insulation or windows. But I think absolutely two things that we should consider as part of implementation of form-based code as we think about how these types of uses will interface.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Great. Matt, you got a follow-up?
Thanks, Aaron. My follow-up actually kind of connects a little bit between how Junie started us off with her question about what future councils may or may not be able to do, and Lauren talking about the future stuff. And I guess where I want to coalesce around that is previous area or sub-community plans were kind of just done, and that was the way things were, and we did them for all time without much cooking in time for adaptability. It is an exercise of hubris for us to assume we know the full outcomes for 30 years from now. And so how do we cook that in? How do we not bake in obsolescence when we start a plan? We have the best intentions. We have some areas that are going to be adaptable. But how do we cook in those check-ins like we do with the Boulder Valley Comp Plan so that we can actually just be like, all right, where is the community at? Where are regulations at? Where is the market at? And do we need to make some large or small adjustments to these plans to continue to meet the needs of our community going forward? So that's a concern I have, and so I'm just wondering, is it appropriate to even bake that in a plan like this to say, hey, every 10 years like we do a comp plan, can we just check in? Because I agree with Junie's point, you don't want just any council at any time to kind of throw up the curtain and say, we're going to redo this now. But when it's planned and staff has a chance to work through that, knowing it's coming on the horizon. So I'm kind of curious about, is there a process for that, and can we do that?
Yeah, so a couple things. One idea that we have that would be part of the implementation of the project is on the city website and the webpage for this, having a tool that would track implementation. So all of those programs, policies, and the prioritization that's listed at the back of the plan, creating some kind of tool so the community always knows where we're at on each of those ideas. In the plan itself, the sub-community plan on the very last page describes the amendment process and expectations around amendments. So that piece of it is included in the plan, but as far as a regular check-in for sub-community plans, that's kind of a new idea for us, but certainly open to it.
Okay, I got Rachel and then Sarah.
Super quick question on that last point. I assume the question was put like, how would council look at it? But we're together with planning board tonight, and I don't want to dismiss that. It would be a planning board and council, like both would have to change this, right? And both would have to look at it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great, Sarah, and then let's see if we can go to the public hearing.
So I'm just wondering if you could explore with us a little bit about the overlap between the East Boulder subcommunity boundaries and the opportunity zone, and what the implications are in terms of the discussion about incentives that were mentioned at the planning board hearing back in March to try to encourage developers to redevelop the stamp area in the ways proposed for the plan. Just would really like to have you walk us through those areas that are already pretty heavily incentivized because of the opportunity zone. Thank you.
Yeah, so I put a map up so folks can see the hatched area on that city map is the designated opportunity zone, and so that includes
just so you know, we can't see that.
Oh, you
right
can't
now.
see it? Oh shoot,
No.
I'm sorry. Well, I don't know how to share it, but I can describe that the opportunity zone in East Boulder is north of Arapahoe, west of 55th, and south of Valmont. And I might actually ask Jennifer Pinsino to speak to incentive programs related to the opportunity zone and how they might impact redevelopment in this area.
Sure, Jennifer Pinsino, City Manager's Office. The Opportunity Zone incentives, that is a federal program. And so the city doesn't necessarily, I mean, we have business incentives, but they are totally independent from opportunity zones. Again, it's a federal program. My understanding is that those incentives that come through are their benefits that accrue to the people who invest through opportunity funds into opportunity zones, but the developers themselves don't necessarily directly get those benefits. But again, federal program, it doesn't apply in every situation, and it's something that if you're really interested, we could do more research on, but it's something that somebody who's a tax expert could provide the more definitive answer.
So if I can just follow up, I would appreciate more information on that. And I realize it's a federal program, but lots of developers across the country are benefiting quite significantly from the opportunity zones. And I think as a city, we should be looking for ways for the city to benefit that aren't just in terms of building new buildings, but in terms of letting those who are benefiting from the opportunity zone windfall, so to speak, carry some of the cost burden rather than the city always carrying certain cost burdens. So it would be very helpful to have some additional information. Thank you.
And I'll just note, extensive analysis was done on this topic in 2018, 2019, and it might be helpful to pull up some memos from that time period, which I think contain a lot of that information. So Sarah, that might be a good source of information. Okay, so if not seeing any other questions here, how about we go to the public hearing? So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. We have 2 people signed up to speak. Oh wait, John's got his hand back up. Follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if you could explain how the plan takes into consideration, the draft plan, I should say, takes into consideration the concerns of the folks who use the airport and presently have their, glider towing operation focused on over this area because it's not too much resident activity there. And they've expressed concerns to me about what the impact might be on their operations, and it'd be interesting to know how this plan addresses that.
Yeah, so we met with a couple of folks who fly glider planes out at the airport, and there's they use a tow plane to take off. So the plan, I think we met with them maybe a month ago, and since that conversation, we've updated recommendations. I think it's maybe we added, I think it's M16 is the actual recommendation that describes future steps for doing a Part 150 study, which helps us understand any noise impacts that might indicate compatibility issues. And then as part of future steps, we would look at expanding that. We could potentially look at expanding that airport influence zone. And that's outlined in the plan now.
So how would that impact what the plan proposes and what we're dealing with at this point?
Yeah, so some of the things that might come out of that study and an expansion of the airport influence zone, and I think what some of those advocates are most interested in would be something like an navigation easement. So just letting property owners or potential property owners or potential renters know that gliders fly in that airspace and that they use a tow plane to get up there.
So basically requiring information to be provided to anyone proposing to have property there. Is that how it's dealt with?
Yep, that's correct. And you know, my understanding from those folks is their concern is that there would be an increase in complaints about flights.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I think we'll go to the public hearing. We've got two people signed up, Lynn Siegel and Kurt Nordback. So if we can get that started, please.
Unbelievable. Two lousy people. Unbelievable.
You're not lousy at all.
You better get some more interest in this, because this is big. Just say no, East Boulder subcommunity. No. No to the opportunity zone. Moratorium up on the Oz. In 10 years, you can just walk out free of cost. This is outrageous. Where's my timer again? Can't we get the timer on here? Guess not. Economic analysis. How could you possibly be thinking on going forward with this without an economic analysis? You need per capita charges for each person. Notice the rec centers lately, there's nobody to work there. And we're gonna flood more people into the rec centers that we have. This is not a friggin' afterthought like Rock Creek was. They build the town and then they figure out the streets and the community centers and the infrastructure as an afterthought. No way. Snap out of it, council. Snap out of it, planning board. You know, you want in the industrial zone, you want the Banjo store. I think I know the guy that has that store. You know, how are you going to do this when you're funding micro housing? Micro units are not cheaper. Snap out of it. Not cheaper. They're more expensive. The smaller they are, the more money they can get squeezed out. Growth equals growth. Say no to CU South and East Boulder subcommunity. Form-based code, zoning, do whatever you want. Multi-use zoning, but you know what? Growth equals growth. And that's what drives up the cost of everything. And the hedge funders and the equity investors love it. They just love it. How dare Jane Brodigan have approved the opportunity zone? Put a moratorium on it now. Now. Let's see here. If you had my video on right now, you'd see my thumb running over my 4 fingers. That's what this is all about. Thumb over 4 fingers. It's all about the money. Follow the money, honey. That's micro units. That's where they get their money. The Health Sciences Center that was entertained at Planning Board last week. Yep, that drives up the cost. Big time. Apple, you know, big time. And you're talking about making this affordable. More housing. You know what more housing drives is more service workers. And guess what? It doesn't matter if you have transit. Those people don't want to be on the bus all day when they have families and they have lives also. They don't want to live. Not only that, someone in Gun Barrel, Boguski, left for Denver because there wasn't enough there anymore. There's not, you know, don't pressure luck.
Lynn, your time is up.
Not that desirable a place.
Thank you for your testimony. Next we have Kurt Nordback.
Hi, Kurt Nordback, 777 Delwood Avenue. I'm continuing my campaign to get us to think a little bigger picture about parks in East Boulder. Currently, there are just a couple of big parks, mostly Valmont City Park and the bike and dog parks across the street. There's also a large undeveloped parcel east of Valmont City Park that's planned to be additional park space directly, but there's currently little to no park space walkable from where people work and live, or from where a lot more people will be working and living in the future. I understand the history behind the situation, but it's contrary to most of our transportation and planning goals. If we were to develop the empty parcel east of Valmont City Park, it would create, as a park, it would create what I call the big box store of parks. A big box store is large scale, something most people drive to, that sucks the energy out of small, local walkable stores. If developed as currently envisioned, Valmont City Park would be similar. So my suggestion is to exchange that empty park for additional small neighborhood parks distributed across the East Boulder subcommunity area. It would allow many more of the future residents and workers to walk to a park, and it would allow the empty parcel to be used for a mix of uses, hopefully including a lot more housing in a great location next to Goose Creek and the existing park. This seems completely aligned with the goals that staff heard from the community. This is one key to a delightful, walkable, sustainable urbanism. Please consider not creating a big box park and instead allow for both neighborhoods and a richer mix of uses along Valmont. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. That's everyone who signed up. Were there any follow-up questions prompted from the public hearing? Rachel?
One on the parks question. My understanding is that the Valmont Park space is already parks owned and it's planned as a large park. So I don't know that there's much movement there, but I don't know also that it's either or, that we can't have the small neighborhood parks along with that. So just wondering, staff, is there room for more parks? Do we need more parks? Are there already enough in there in your estimation, near where there's going to be housing and people working?
Yeah, so we've had the great benefit of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan going on at the same time as the subcommunity plan. So we've been able to coordinate with that group. And when that department has been looking at levels of service, they've looked at our projected populations, and we're anticipated to meet our level of service for the amount of park space per person. But the plan also includes an idea for a program about privately owned public space. And so this is a program that we've seen implemented in other cities where, as development occurs, we can work with developers to help identify and create more social gathering spaces, especially when we're thinking about potentially larger development projects and being able to kind of work across different parcels to create more green space access.
Okay. Well, seeing no other follow-up questions, then I would then request for someone from the planning board to make a motion to continue your agenda item to Thursday, May 5th for this item. John?
Well, I think we're happy to do that. I had thought that there would be an opportunity for all of us to ask additional questions of staff if there are any.
I had offered that opportunity, and if you missed it, you're welcome to do so now.
Well, I just want to make sure everyone realizes here that this is their best chance to do that. Seeing none, I think I'd like to ask for a motion for planning board to continue this agenda on Thursday, May 5th, 2022 for board deliberation and action on the proposed East Boulder subcommunity plan. We won't take any additional public comment then on this item. And I'd like to see if we can get a motion to do that.
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Looks like everybody likes that idea, so that's what we'll do. Thank you, and we appreciate joining you for this public hearing.
It's been great having you all here with us tonight. Really appreciate the questions and look forward to hearing the results of your deliberation.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Yeah.
All right. And then do we need a similar motion for the council?
Yes, Mayor, you sure do.
Anyone?
Move to continue this.
All right. I just recognized
She started talking. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I'll second your motion.
Second that.
I move to continue this public hearing until next week, May 17.
May 10th.
I'm sorry, May 10th. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Great, we have a motion and second. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. So that is continued. All right, well, thanks once again to staff. Phenomenal presentation, great answers to all of those detailed questions. Really appreciate all of your work and looking forward to coming back in a week and see if we can't finish this thing out.
We'll see you next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, that closes our public hearings for this evening. Alicia, you want to take us into our next item?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We have next item 6 on tonight's agenda, matters from the city manager. 6A is a discussion on allowing video testimony from public participants at council meetings.
Thank you, Alicia, and Sarah Huntley is getting ready to take over that issue. Thank you. I should continue talking just to give you a moment to sit.
Good evening, Council. Let me just cue up the presentation if you don't mind. Okay, the mouse does not appear to be working here to get me out of this presentation onto the matters presentation. That would be terrific. We appear to be. Thank you for your technical support, Deputy City Manager.
Chris is a man of many talents.
He absolutely is. Okay. All right, I found it. Okay, terrific. We're in business. Thank you for your patience. We are anticipating that this will be a relatively short conversation, but I wanted to bring up a topic about video testimony for council meetings. This is a topic that we've talked about in the past with previous councils. We have some new council members, and as you all know, we're about to enter an exciting new phase where council meetings are actually available to the public, both in person and online. So we are very excited about that offering. It's definitely an enhanced engagement service, but we do have some questions for you with regard to video testimony, and we're just going to run through those today. So as a recap for past council members and a little bit of a guidance for current new council members, we have been welcoming testimony for community members throughout this pandemic virtually for city council meetings. In March of 2020, we pivoted pretty quickly to learning some new technology to try to continue to allow for public participation. However, due to security and First Amendment concerns, we had to make a determination pretty early on in the pandemic that we would only allow testimony to be audio in these virtual environments. We had at least one unfortunate situation in a city council hosted event, and I know some community groups have also experienced some unfortunate incidents with what we call Zoom bombing, people showing video of inappropriate things in public meetings, really designed to disrupt those sessions. The issue today is whether we want to continue to allow testimony in a virtual space to be audio only. We've talked about this a couple times, and council has opted to keep the testimony audio only. What's different about today is that we are, as I mentioned, going into this exciting new world where we are going to, starting May 17th, be giving our community two different ways to participate in council meetings. One is from the convenience of their own home. They can continue to testify as they have throughout the pandemic, signing up for public hearings and open comment in a virtual format. The other is for people who really desire to come down to council chambers and be here in your presence. They will be able to do that once again. The situation that we have, however, is that we will have two different levels, I suppose, of participation. If they're in an online space, people will still be only audio. That's the staff recommendation because of the very same security concerns and First Amendment concerns that existed when we were in a virtual only space. If people are here, however, they can stand at the podium and they can be fully seen. Your facial expressions can be seen by each of you. So we think that actually what we're offering is two different opportunities, and community members are free to decide what's most important to them, the convenience of being in their own home or coming here and being seen fully in person. We do very much see this as an enhancement of engagement experience, but we recognize some folks really would like to be able to turn their camera on, and we're asking you once again what your thoughts as a council are about that, given some of the concerns that have been expressed in the past and the experiences that we've had. So to be clear, the staff recommendation is that we welcome the community back in both these forums starting on May 17th, but that we continue to have testimony from the public be audio only if they're testifying in our Zoom platform. Gives us the best ability to control and prevent those unfortunate incidents. If somebody really wants to be seen, they're more than welcome to come here and stand at the podium and be seen by their council as they express their viewpoints.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Thoughts from council? I see Junie, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you. I just have a question. I really appreciate giving community members both opportunity, especially if someone cannot come here due to various reasons. So that's really great. My question to you, it relates to having, I wonder what's the issue, because I remember, I'm not sure if the rest of council, some of the new council members know really, what's the security reason as to why we don't allow videos?
Sure, I can be more specific. So in the Zoom world, we have found that there are sometimes folks who are more interested in disrupting the meeting than actually participating in meaningful engagement. And we had an incident very early on where we hosted a public engagement event actually around COVID and what people's needs were, where council members were present. And we had some folks come in. I actually don't believe they were from the city of Boulder, but come into the meeting and they were displaying child pornographic images on the video behind them. And in fact, even when we turned that video off, some of them were using the name screen to display some still images that were similar in nature. And that put staff moderating that meeting, namely myself, in the difficult position of having to make a determination about whether to allow that person to stay in the meeting. And we've since been advised by the city attorney's office that we have to be very mindful of the First Amendment. We obviously want to support everybody's rights to speak and express themselves, and that situations that put staff in that sort of content arbiter role are very challenging. And so we made a determination to not allow video from that point forward. People are able to speak their mind, of course, and be heard verbally by you all as council members, but we limited the video capability.
I'll just either ask a follow-up or also make a comment. I am on a different board, but at the state level where community members meaning the whole state of Colorado, people come in and they actually use their videos and we've never had any issues, but I do understand the concern. But I'm wondering, is there a way that you can control the background, or is there's no way to control that background, that once you open that video, it's just anything can be seen from that side?
So I'm going to address both parts of that if I can. We know that there are government agencies that are allowing video testimony. It's really, there's a wide range. We did a little bit of a brief survey of some local governments. I know that the state in many instances is allowing video. And I truly believe that in 99% of the situations, community members and folks who want to testify on these matters are showing up in good faith. Mm-hmm. It's that 1% chance, which we've already experienced, that causes us a lot of difficulty. We can't, unless we gave everybody a background screen and required them to use it, had some sort of enforcement if they didn't use it, and gave them the technical training in order to activate it, it's not really something that we can control from here.
Thank you.
Do I have a follow-up question to that, folks. Do we have additional implications because we're broadcasting the meeting on TV?
You know, we've received some conflicting information on that. We certainly have to be thinking, in general, we want to be thinking about FCC regulations. We are a government access channel, and some advice I have received suggests that that's not as applicable to us as commercial channels. But nonetheless, we want to make sure that we're maintaining good standards of television for people who have access to this in their homes.
Thanks. Yeah, Nicole, and then Rachel.
Yeah, I think my only concern with the Zoom option, I think I've stated this before as well, is COVID is still going on, right? People are still dying, they're still being hospitalized. And for folks that have that are immune compromised or have some sort of disorder that makes them very susceptible to COVID, is there any way that we can have an option for them to have a video for Zoom as well, so that it is equitable and not just kind of offering them the chance to hear their voice, but to actually see their faces in the same way that they could if they came in, which poses a health risk to them?
Yeah, I greatly understand and appreciate the equity concern for folks who cannot physically make the choice to come into the council chambers. I may let our city attorney weigh in here, but I think that the challenge is that carving out exceptions requires us to make some determinations that could step over the line. But Teresa, do you have some thoughts about
Teresa,
that?
just before you, I'm just wondering, I mean, to me, it feels very similar to, say, having a wheelchair accessible door or something like that. And so I would be interested, too, in just understanding what's the difference here that makes that not possible.
Thanks for that question. When we're talking about the First Amendment, it's hard if we start parsing out groups of people for different treatment than others. You know, your ADA accommodation idea is an interesting one, and frankly not one I've looked into, how the ADA would intersect with the First Amendment here. I will tell you that I have some reservations about creating special classes of folks to have different rights than other people who are participating in the meeting.
Rachel, and then I'll call myself.
Well, first of all, listening to that, Sarah, Bob and I have been the council members of the subcommittee on engagement since I got on council, and you know, hearing you talk about like pivoting really quickly in April 2020, and that I think Bob and I were the ones in that meeting where the Zoom bombing occurred, and it was, I guess, for anyone not understanding, it was extremely graphic and difficult thing. So I'm still pretty chastened from that as well, and do want to say I'm so appreciative of all the work that you've done on the engagement subcommittee for the last 2 years. It has not been easy, and you've been working hard, and I know that you've been looking, and the team, at issues of equity and fairness, and I also appreciate that for, you know, other cities or other agencies that are able to do this may have more robust staffing. Like, we've lost a lot of staff during COVID, so appreciate, you know, the balancing act that we have to find. And then also just want to say that I used to testify a lot in front of council, and there was just a few weeks, maybe it was a few months, where we could call in a couple years ago, and it was difficult, it didn't work. And there were a couple times where I was sick and I couldn't get here and I had to cancel. So I think that this is a silver lining to COVID, that now we are going to have an opportunity to still be heard that we didn't have 2 years ago. So again, just grateful. I think we are adding an extra layer of engagement that wasn't possible 2 years ago. So I wish that we had a more perfect solution, but I think this one's pretty good. So thanks for all your work.
So I'll call on myself. I agree with the staff recommendation to keep it audio only. I think the difficulty of making a determination on the spot about whether something is speech allowed by the First Amendment or not in terms of visual offensive material is a very difficult one, and I hate to put staff in that position. I might find myself in that position, or a future mayor might, which would be a very challenging one. Not being a First Amendment attorney, might make the wrong call. But Nicole, I really appreciate your equity point, and I would just say that I've heard a great deal of public testimony over the last 10 odd years And I've found the Zoom testimony to be, audio only, to be as impactful as the in-person testimony that I've heard over the years. So I view it as different options for community members for what they would most appreciate, but I feel like their testimony will be give me the same amount of impact in terms of the weight that their voice has. So I'm comfortable with keeping it audio only for the remote testimony. So, any other thoughts on this matter before we?
Thank you. We will be preparing some guidance to prepare the community for this exciting opportunity to have two options and be publicizing that, and we will be as clear as we can be in what people can expect in terms of their options to testify. I appreciate your feedback this evening.
Thanks very much for revisiting the question as we move into this next phase. Okay, next we got a couple matters of mayor, members of council.
Yes, sir. We have item 8A, which is a discussion, endorsement, or not a 5 that's related to the letter of support for Councilmember Joseph's election to the Colorado Municipal League Board.
Junie, do you want to just give us a quick description of what you're going for here?
Yes, thank you. I'm a member of the policy committee for CML, which I was appointed by the council, and I will be seeking election to the board this summer, and I had to submit a letter, and basically I'm just requesting a out of 5 from council.
Great. Well, I'm just going to call on myself and just say, as mayor, I'm extremely grateful to you for stepping up and submitting your name forward. I know you'll represent the city incredibly well at the CML Policy Board. So I just wonder if we can just have an acclamation here for, yay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for stepping up.
Thank you.
Got one more.
Yes, sir. Next, 8B, discussion that's related to Councilmember Folkert's participation in a regional minimum wage working group.
Lauren, you want to describe what you're up to here?
Yeah, so as you know, the state preemption on minimum wage has changed, and we're now allowed to enact local minimum wages through the Boulder County Consortium of Cities. We're forming a working group to look at that. A number of neighboring communities all looking at it together, because under the new state law, there's sort of a maximum number of implementations of this that can happen. That, along with the benefits of implementing over a wider area so that some of the pitfalls to minimum wage can be eased. You know, for instance, if all the surrounding communities do it, we don't stand such a risk of businesses maybe moving just outside of city limits or something like that. So I am looking for support from council to join this working group. And as we progress, so as this is something that would have to be implemented by the city eventually for it to come into play here, I will also maybe coming back with a request for staff time just to look at, review what we're working on and make sure that we're going in the right direction. What we are starting, so when the working group is formed, which will be in the next consortium meeting, one of the first things we'll be looking at will be an outreach and engagement sort of plan to make sure that we're getting a number of stakeholders involved as well.
Thanks for that. I'm going to ask a clarifying question over here to Teresa. So by designating Lauren for this with a nod of 5, my understanding is that we would be empowering her to participate in this working group, but that any official action to raise the minimum wage in the city would require public hearings and public engagement later on in the process. Is that correct?
Yes, your understanding is correct, Mayor.
Great. So any comments from folks on this idea? I'm seeing okay, 100% thumbs up. I really appreciate you taking this on, Lauren. This is an important discussion. Really look forward to what the working group comes up with.
Sounds good. Thank you.
We are being efficient tonight. So I think that's it. Does anybody have any other final thoughts? Junie?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
There was a CAC comment that was sent in by Councilmember Mark, who's not here today. So I'm wondering, is that discussion happening next week about revisiting our rules when it comes to attending remotely or in person?
Yeah, so what happened was we were all set to authorize Mark to participate remotely tonight. Thanks for bringing this up, Junie. But because he did initially inform us that he was ill and would not be able to attend in person, so we were getting set to authorize him to attend virtually. Then it turns out that he was so sick he was not even up to attending virtually, so it didn't end up coming up here. But we are having a larger discussion on exactly when you attend virtually and when in person. I think generally the agreement is that for a one-off, it's fine to participate virtually, but we'll have a larger discussion. Teresa, do you want to, not Teresa, Nuria, do you want to tell us?
Sure, we do plan, and we had planned to bring this forward around this time, actually, but with all the sort of rebalancing of meetings, we decided to wait a little bit, but we want to make sure that we give you options on some rules as we move forward. I'll also say that virtual attendance may be impacted by whatever state laws may impact attendance for meetings. Right now, under the emergency orders, they're allowed to be virtual, and we'll be looking again into whether that can continue in the future. But if it does, we want to make sure that we offer council some options, whether it can happen anytime, or you want a limited amount of time in which you're virtual because you prefer to be together as a council body. So we'll be doing that in the future.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Great. Matt?
So this was brought up at CAC, and I just sort of maybe want to catalog it for my colleagues here. And so I'm sort of doing it in a way to set an example for the conversation we may want to have, which is just the process that is there for matters of council. And I know we're very formal with sending in a hotline and requests, and I'm wondering if there's ways in which we can talk about the organics in which those matters for council come up, where at any point or at the end we can bring up a situation or an issue, and it can be either quickly resolved or dealt with rather quickly. And if it requires a longer conversation, the discretion of mayor and of course our city manager can say, yep, let's do that later. But it may be just a little more clarity, I think, for all of us as to where and how those matters come up for some of that small stuff that doesn't require either formal letters or emails and then long duration waits before we get to address it, because we can then just knock some of that stuff out rather quick, like perhaps even Lauren's request could have been knocked out pretty quick if it was brought up as a matter, at any given night. So anyway, just a thought for down the road. Hopefully we can maybe have a full more detailed discussion of that.
Matt, you're out of order. That was inappropriate. No, I'm just kidding. So, but it's a fair point, and we're having some process discussions coming up, right?
I was just about to comment on that. Certainly there are some guidelines in the handbook, but we are coming back with some opportunities to do process changes. We're actually really glad you're thinking about this, because one of the reasons we chose to remove or separate process changes from the beginning of the retreat was to give you all, particularly our new folks, some opportunity to be in the midst of council meetings to see what are those things that you want to change as you really settled into your new roles. And so we hope to bring those up soon as well. We'll probably be bringing both the timing and those process changes at the same time.
Great. Anything else? Well, with that, I will gavel as closed at 8:46.
It's a miracle.
Great meeting, everybody.
You were so funny.
Jokes.